Should be live right now. Let me X out some things. I gotta turn up the volume. There we go. Let's see. You still there? You still with me?
Still here.
All right. I didn't cut you out. Great. So, The Real Nordic Black. Welcome to my channel, The Real Nordic Black. I'm Rob G, and we have a special distinguished guest again today. We had a double header today. Tonight we have, well, afternoon for him in the States, Reginald V. Finley. He's, I'll talk some about his bio, and then I'll let him chime in on anything that I've missed or anything he can add. He's a visiting professor of biology at Valencia College and an adjunct professor of scientific literacy at Franklin University. Currently resides in Orlando, Florida. Tutors students around the world in biology and chemistry. Co-author of On Teaching Evolution, and his two flagships currently are Amazinglife.Bio and healthandsciencefacts.com. On Teaching Evolution right there. Perfect. And and he runs those two, you created and run those two websites as well, correct? Amazinglife.bio and healthandsciencefacts.com. He has a master's in biology, master's in science education, doctoral candidate, research, evaluating critical thinking aptitudes in science teachers and its impacts on science pedagogy. Some quick facts about him. He's the creator of the host and host of the Infidel Guy show. And he can get more into that once.
We'll talk. We'll talk over that. Yeah, we can go down to points,
right.
Just, here and there as we go through that. So
definitely, because that's important to highlight. The creator of the host of the Infidel Guy show from 1999 to 2012. A number of guests had appearances or series on the show and started their own programs and podcasts. He used to, this one right here, I didn't know. He used to sing with an R&B gospel group in Atlanta. They later became 112. That's Cupid. Right. U.S. Army veteran, infantry. I didn't know that. I'm a Air Force veteran. I mean, yeah. And my father was an Army veteran as well, so I have a lot of military in my family. And he's a vegan.
That's right. So we're gonna talk about all of that. We're gonna talk about all of it. We're gonna talk about it all. For sure. Yeah. So let's. I guess we shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves, because there's still so much we can cover. And if I forget anything, you can come back to some of those points and we can holler about it.
No doubt. But yeah, thanks for having me. This is a sharp brother that I'm talking to.
Oh, I'm not that sharp, man. I'm the slowest person I know. All right.
And very supportive too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on the program. I really appreciate it.
Hence on your t-shirt says support.
Oh, indeed, man. I gotta always rep the science, man. Always. But yeah, I'm an Atlanta native, born and raised, and I really have always had a fascination with science. Really, starting back from my mom. Really, kind of she exposed me to a lot of sci-fi, and my brothers were into science, especially my brother Danny. He was actually studying Drosophila, which are fruit flies, for those who don't know. And he was doing genetic mutations and experiments with them and stuff like that. I found that fascinating. And flies would always end up in the house. They would always end up in the house somewhere. But from that moment on, man, I know, right? It's like, but from that point on, I decided I wanted to be a scientist, And so I wanted to be an astronaut and a biologist. I wanted to find a cure for cancer. And so, and I come from a military background. My great uncles, were military. My father was in the Navy. My son, one of my sons is in the Air Force. Another one has just joined the Navy himself. So
I have a daughter in the Army right now. Military police station in Hawaii right now.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Yeah.
24-year-old.
Yeah. So I guess what's interesting, I guess I was given that background because it's interesting how I ended up becoming exactly those. I guess we're products of our environment, and obviously in many cases. And so I ended up joining the military. Well, let's back up because I was singing. So I started singing, and
yeah, because I was a surprise when I read that. I was like,
it's really weird because I guess what happened was I realized. Well, we'll get to that. But science is hard, right? Science is really, really hard. And so I didn't realize how hard it was. And I got a little discouraged from it. And I kind of deviated from that. I failed chemistry. I got a D in microbiology. I was just horrible at science in high school.
Okay.
But I did love to sing. And it was something I used to always do. I wasn't really good at it, I didn't think, but I loved to do it. And I met these guys in high school. Actually, I was doing a summer right before high school. For them, I was the oldest one in the group, but I met these guys. One of my neighborhood friends introduced me to his cousin and his friend. And anyway, he said, yeah, they can sing, man. You should like get with these guys. And I was like, okay, cool. And so we created a group, and I created the name of the group was called Forte, and it stood for Forever en Route to Excellence. And we competed in like a lot of talent shows all over Atlanta, and I was the oldest in the group, so I did a lot of my girl chasing, and so by the time I graduated, I started to realize, okay, let's get serious about this thing. But now they were coming of age, and then they started doing the girl chasing, and that didn't work out. So I said, hey, guys, we got to get serious with this. We need to make some money. We need to make some moves on this. And there was a lot of drama going on in the group with parents. One particular parent was pulling one of the singers out of the group and caused all kind of drama. And so I joined the military, and I told the fellas, I was like, hey, I'm going to join the army. And it was like, man, you ain't gonna join the army. I was like, yeah, I'm joining the army.
All right.
And
well, I almost failed to mention I have another daughter that's an adult. She lives in Atlanta, actually.
Oh,
yeah, my 21-year-old.
Okay, yeah.
And they live close to downtown ATL, so we have a lot of cross.
We got a lot in common. I mean, we can talk about that probably on or off the air. But but yeah. So so after basic training, I came back home. I sang with them in a talent show, actually, and that's when we got discovered. And Kevin Wells was his name, and he was the one who discovered us. And then, but I had to go back to Germany because I had orders, so I had to go back. And he's like, well, can you just sing with you guys? Since he's not here, they sang without me. He said, oh, you guys sound great. Let me introduce you to Puffy, and they became 112. And so that was really the history of that. And it wasn't until I got out of the military and I came back home, I was in my friend's car, and he's like, man, I love this jam. Cuba was playing. He's like, and I said, I recognize that voice. It's like, because I heard it. Yeah, if I told you I love you. I was like, I know that voice. He said, you don't know them. He said, well, yeah, that's 112. I said, 112? They sound like Forte, because that's Mike. And I said, that's Deron. I recognize these voices. And that's Marvin. And he was like, huh? No, his name is Slim. So we go back to Walmart. I was working at Walmart at the time. Just got a job there. We go back to Walmart, pull up the jacket, look at the sleeve of the CD. Okay. And there they were, all my homeboys we sung with in high school. And then right on the card, if people still have that first album, if you look inside, it says, to my brother, Reginald Finley. So yeah. If you look at it. So it's pretty cool that they did. So they did acknowledge me. But after that, they never really mentioned me. And I think it was really just more of a, it's an industry thing.
Pay them respects and just, keep it pushing, right?
Exactly. So, but it's cool. I mean, but now it's like all these years later though, right? And so I got out of the military. I worked for the federal prison system for a little while.
Okay.
As a correction officer.
See, it's funny because I have stories that go, wow, that's when people say, oh, how old are you, man? and so I want to ask you, I'm 44, about to be 45, July 29th this summer. Okay. How old are you?
I'm 47.
47. Okay.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, but it's funny. I did most of the stuff I did in life was before I hit 30. So a lot of people are like, dude, like, how did you go through all these things?
Right.
But yeah, and I discovered really as working as a correction officer for the feds, I started to realize that my true passion was really just helping people, which is kind of what my childhood dream was to help people in the first place.
So I guess we're going to go chronologically before we hit that infidel.
Exactly. If you don't mind, I don't want to.
Yeah, I like it. I like it, brother.
I don't want to bore anybody.
You got a scientific mind. So
man, there's a lot going on here.
Right. Let's do it.
I never get a chance, I don't think, to really explain my whole story. So I appreciate you kind of listening a little bit. And it's going to get interesting, even more interesting.
No doubt.
But yeah, so I was actually helping prevent inmates from committing suicide, and I was really
Mm.
good at talking to guys. They put me in the W ward, which is where we used to kind of colloquially, call it the wacko ward, but but
Right,
that's where
right.
we would, our inmates with serious psychological, issues would go, threatening to kill themselves or attempted suicide, and we would
Mm.
put them there. And I was on duty a lot in the W ward, and I would talk to these inmates. And this is a really interesting transition because this is how I started really falling out of theology and moving more towards just a much more critical scientific mindset.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these guys came in with a lot of trauma from the church, and I kept noticing this pattern. They'll say, "Oh, my pastor abandoned me. My wife left me for the pastor," or the Bible says this, and I got to be this way and that way. And I started having conversations with these guys, and that's when I really started delving more into the Bible myself.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, I actually taught Bible study a long time ago. Another
Right,
story,
right,
but
right, right.
I did teach Bible study at one point. But I learned even more so when I started really counseling these guys. And I was told, "Hey, you can't counsel these guys. You're a correction officer. Stop talking to these fellas. That's not your job." And I said, "I think that should be my job, though, because I'm obviously I'm good at it." And when I would come on shift, like these crazy inmates, they would be throwing crap at people. They would be like cussing people out, trying to fight, not throwing food trays out. When I came on, never happened. They always showed me respect. They brought it down a little bit, and we just talked like men. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so they respected that. And I said, okay, there's something going on here. So I realized I got to leave this. I cannot be part of the system because I felt like I was a part-time inmate myself. And I felt like I'm just in here, just not really helping. And they
Right.
wouldn't let me help. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started going online to see if there are others out there who also, can help people either with, through thinking. I didn't even know what critical thinking was at the time.
Do you think some of it was because of the way that, as well as some of the officers approached in
Oh
sport
yeah.
too, and like they weren't
Oh yeah.
human and stuff like
Oh
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Oh yeah. I've seen. I got
Right.
to be careful what I say on the air, but I've
Yeah.
seen some things that I wish
Mm.
I did not see. There were some abuses there. There's a gang mentality, just like we know with many police officers on the street. You see the same thing, in correctional facilities, and people who are correction officers who are listening, they know that's true. There's a gang mentality, and you have different factions of correction
I
officers.
hear that. I hear
It's,
that.
it's just it's just
Yeah.
reality. You
And
got the good ones, you got the real bad
for
ones.
sure, for sure, and that's what I hear. Right. And we're at that time, and were there majority black, the inmates? At the,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
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 This is USP Atlanta too. So yeah, it was
Right.
predominantly black.
No doubt. Yeah.
Then followed by I think Hispanics and then white.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty rough. And so and that's something I just kept. I didn't want to be a part of that system. So and like I said, around the same time, I started studying the Bible more, like really getting deep into it. I started studying a little bit of Greek. I started looking at Hebrew, and I started discovering that everything I thought I knew was just wrong. And I started devising these questions I had about religion, and especially Christianity, because that's where I came from. I used to sing gospel with my boys, a forte, and so I was like, yeah,
Did you have a family that kind of forced you to go to church,
good
were
question.
they churchgoers, your mom and dad?
That is a really good question. No, but
Okay.
my mom, she always told me, look, we were, our background is Methodist.
Mm.
And then I would hear that from other sides of the family that, we come from Methodist, but I was never forced to go to church. And my mom actually allowed me to just go to any church as a kid growing up.
Wow.
If my friends wanted me to go, if they wanted
Nice.
to go to mass and they invited me, I went. So you're talking to somebody
Not
who had
not
experience.
all black children,
Exactly.
had that yeah.
That experience. That's right. And so I was fortunate. So I was able to go to, again, Catholic mass. I've been to mosques,
Mm.
churches, institutions, you name it, all the
Right.
different kind of structures out there I was invited to.
Right.
And I began to notice some commonalities among all of them. And one of them are that, well, they contradict each other in many ways, even though some people would deny that. They really
Mm.
do contradict themselves in many ways. And none of them really had any evidence for any of
Mm.
their claims. They just believed this because they were raised that way. They were taught that. And so I started beginning to kind of step back and start looking at things more skeptically and critically. And a little bit later on, when I started studying it a little bit more deeper, but I was a spiritualist kind of person. I did kind of believe in ghosts and spirits and aliens and Men in Black, dragons, Loch Ness. I mean, all that stuff kids want to believe in. But I didn't have a religious foundation, thank goodness. But my skepticism started. So I actually created a website. It's still up. It's called questionsaboutgod.com.
Okay.
It is still up. Questionsaboutgod.com. What happened was when I was working for the federal prison, I was sitting in a tower, and all these questions started coming to my head about religion, and I just started writing them all down. And I took a college course about Old Testament wisdom and New Testament wisdom, and that also really started waking me up. And so I started writing all that down, and I started sharing that with people, and I'll tell you that experience next.
Now, does that tie into the Black Planet and for people that don't know, that are tuned in, most of them are probably younger than us, and a lot of them from out here in Europe are connected to my Facebook and my YouTube. So sometimes we may have to explain certain things that they may not understand and can relate to. So yeah, because we talked about this Black Planet platform, and that means, man, I was like, because you say you were.
That's how it all. You know what? You're perfect interjection, because I started posting those questions on the very early websites that were out there, GeoCities, and many people remember GeoCities and AOL pages and all.
Was that during MySpace? That was the same kind of MySpace, and then there was and around that time back then there was a called Black Planet, and they catered to Black people of color, correct?
That's right.
At the time, and then there was another one called
GeoCities.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I had websites at all those and pages at all those early sites, and I started posting my questions. Yeah. And so here I am thinking, wow, I've discovered this new knowledge. I am now, well, before there was the term woke, but I have awakened. I have now discovered this new reality, and I wanted to share that with other Black people, because we were tricked. You know, the Bible doesn't say this, and
led astray.
Oh my gosh, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to save my people, right? So I'm getting out there and I'm talking to people, and they're like, "You're a traitor to the Black race. How dare you question my Lord?" No. That passage was wrong. Actually, you don't know anything. I do actually. Ask your pastor. You know, I don't gotta ask my pastor. Well, look at this research. I don't gotta read nothing but the Bible. And it became. It was an awakening,
especially back then,
for me.
Man. Especially
it was rough, because there was only, at the time, I was the only Black non-believer that I knew at the time. I think that's probably why I went out to try to help others, because I was the only one. And again, you're talking 1995, 1996 is about this time. So it wasn't until I discovered a radio show called the Atheism Freedom Liberation Show, hosted by a guy who called himself AFL Jake. His real name is Eric. But he came out with this show, and I really was fascinated. But he would only do it like maybe once every 2 weeks, you know, and the frequency was so low. I started asking him.
Now, when you say radio, because that was definitely pre-podcast.
That's right. You're right. Thank you for
AM,
clarifying. FM. You're right. We called it back then. It was just streaming
pirate
media.
Station.
We called it. It was actually streaming media. You're right. It was not radio. Yeah, it was a streaming podcast. At the time, I think we were using Real Media Streamer. And then Windows Media Streamer came out, and then all these other platforms like Winamp and things like that came out, for people who remember all that stuff. And so, and we started streaming, and so he taught me. So he taught me how to start streaming. So I always give him, homage and respect on that, because he's the one that got me involved. And I started reaching out. I just started recording. I mean, again, I didn't start my podcast to get famous. I didn't start it for any other purpose than really I just felt alone, and I wanted to see if there are others out there like me. And there weren't many. There's only one other Black person that I knew personally. That was Norm Allen Jr. And Norm Allen Jr., he's an author. You can look him up. He's a scholar in Black history, and especially humanism and free thinking in the Black community. But he was the only one that I personally knew. And so I created Black Free Thinkers on, I had a Black Planet page. I had a Yahoo Groups page for those folks that remember Yahoo Groups.
Yeah.
I had a Black Free Thinkers group there, and I even had a couple of websites. I think it was Black
when it was dial-up.
Freethinkers.com.
Back when it was dial-up, huh?
Indeed, because DSL didn't start coming on the scene until like around 97.
Right,
something like that,
right.
90, 96, 97 for
Mm,
most households. So yeah. And so, but once
man,
that was there, yeah, because before that I had to record everything and just sit back and just upload it. And I remember that little file, the little page flipping, like
right.
I
Because
was like
back then
all
you
night.
needed more dedication to get it. It's a bit easier
Yeah.
these days. Right,
Yeah, people don't realize that. Yeah, back in the day, man, that
right.
was I mean, literally I would record an hour show and
Okay.
then I would start uploading it and go to sleep and wake up and hope the file was finished uploading.
True that. Yeah.
So yeah, that was, if people remember those days, that was
Right.
wild.
That's how it was
But
sometimes downloading songs.
exactly. But so that was the
Yeah.
beginning. Especially upload was even slower, as you know,
Oh
as it
yeah.
is still today.
Right,
But
right, right.
so that was the beginning of the Infidel Guy show. And I think
Gotcha.
one of my ex-girlfriends actually gave me that. She called herself the Infidel Gal, funny
Okay.
enough. And I said,
Okay.
well, I guess I'm the Infidel Guy. And it just
Right.
stuck. And
Okay.
the
Okay.
Infidel Guy show was born from there.
And I noticed, speaking of Infidel Guy, when I perused through the YouTube, when I put your name in there, and then it popped up from the famous atheist mythicist. I think he's a mythicist, Robert Price.
Oh, that's
And
right.
on his YouTube channel, he posted it about a year ago. The first video on his YouTube channel is on your show.
That's
And so
right.
I didn't even know that. So I was like, what? I was
That's
like,
right.
this guy.
Yeah, I've been around for a
He said he's
while.
been on my
Yeah.
Facebook, and I've been, some of the comments, because you get into some of my crazy posts every now and then with some logic or something, and I'm like,
Yeah. I
man,
mean,
this guy right here. I was like, hold up, there's something about this guy right here. I said, I know. And then when I saw you on uh have an interview on Aaron Raw, another famous, especially online,
yep, Arn Rod. Yep.
yeah, Aaron Raw,
hmm
atheist mythicist,
hmm
yeah, on his channel about a month
Yep.
ago.
Yep. Mark
um
Mythos. Yeah. I mean,
where it's
I
about
have.
10,000 views. I saw,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I've been on a lot of shows. I mean,
right.
at the show's highest, I had probably about 100,000 listeners all around the world. Um,
Wow. On
yeah, at its
which one are you
highest.
talking about, on your show
On my
or?
show, on the Infidel Guy show,
Okay,
at
yeah,
its
yeah.
highest.
So so
hmm
so so in yeah, get into that. So how was your, at the height, you said you were when did you shut that down? So it was between 1999 and
Yeah,
2000.
it slowed down around 2009, and then it was kind of
Okay.
intermittent,
Okay.
releasing stuff until around 2012, and so that
Okay.
was by the end of it. And
Okay.
really, because there's really kind of like two like internet crash. Well, it was like Google changed their ad revenue, because I kind of
Right.
was I was beginning to post my stuff on YouTube,
Right. Right.
and but they changed their revenue model, and I think I was burned out about that time, and I just said,
Right.
oh,
Right.
whatever, I'm done. I don't, I'm done.
So
So
yeah, because that was a question that people would ask, was like, were there reasons why you didn't keep going, or do you, when you look back, do you regret that you didn't
nah,
keep it going? It'd probably be a
nah.
bigger
Not at all.
thing
I
right
mean, I
now,
think
or
like one lesson I learned, like when I used to sing with 112, well, Forte back in the day,
yeah.
is like you don't you,
And
you don't
yes, that's
regret
112 the
anything.
group with Cupid. If y'all just coming
That's
in now listening in,
yeah,
y'all gonna
yeah,
listen later.
yeah.
Definitely.
But yeah, no regrets at all. I mean, I look at my
Right.
life now. I mean, when I look at some artists in the past, it's a rough industry.
Right.
And I
For
was
sure.
able to much later, finally get an education, a formal education. I'm now a college professor. And I'm making
But I
good
mean, even
money.
before that, I was
So
listening to some
I'm
of
good.
your shows. You was a sharp brother back then. You know what I'm saying? So
It's weird.
yeah,
I mean, it's funny. I look
crazy.
back and listen to that stuff back in the day. I felt like I didn't know anything. I felt like, what was I
Uh,
talking about?
uh,
And I still feel that way today, to be honest. I mean,
right.
the more I learn, the more I realize I don't really know very much at all. And
Mm, mm.
and I think the reality is that most people should feel that way. So that's why I
But I
get really
hear people
upset
like
when
Neil
people,
deGrasse Tyson saying sometimes, believe it or not, in certain scientists,
oh yeah,
they say that. It's funny
I
because
think
certain
if you're
scientists will say what you just said, but
right.
then you'll have another person that hasn't had any type of schooling or training saying they know, acting like they know everything.
Exactly.
You
That's my
know,
point. Exactly. I can't stand it. It's like, what? I'm sitting here, like, I work in the field,
right,
as a, biological sciences educator, and
right,
I teach students how to actually understand science and use science. And you're going to tell me that this data represents your bias or what you think it does, and I'm telling you it doesn't, and then you act like I'm suffering from Dunning-Kruger. Like, no, you are. Or like,
Right.
you are. I mean, it's amazing. The loudest people tend to be people that kind of are a little off, to be honest. Some of the loudest people tend to be a little off, and they have very little knowledge, and people tend to follow and flock toward these people, which is.
That's what it is. So this segues into the next thing. What led you to this journey into biology, science, or even eventually critical thinking?
Yeah. So after I call it, I guess the collapse of the Infidel Guy show, even though, as you mentioned, I mean, it's still up, infidelguy.com. So if people want to listen to the old program, they can. There's like almost 500 shows there.
Okay.
So yeah, if you can binge on Naruto, you can probably listen to my shows if you want to.
Definitely. And okay, before we get out of that, then before we move out of the Infidel Guy, what are some of the most memorable moments for you on that show?
And it's so funny because this is going to segue
because you have some big
science.
So there was some big. You had Robert Price, but I don't know who else.
I had Dr. Michael Shermer, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins. A lot of activists out there at the time, especially the battle between church and state. Michael Newdow, representatives from American Atheists, a lot of authors on evolution, a lot of them. Dr. Massimo Pigliucci, he's actually he's an Italian-born scientist and philosopher, and he helped get me on board. So really my biological sciences educators, I mean, and in the field and in the lab scientists that are brought on really helped to get me more interested in the science. And I started noticing, I'm getting pretty good at understanding the science stuff now. But it wasn't until, so around 2012, I actually went back into the workforce. I decided it was time to go back to school and go back into the workforce because I was just kind of burned out with the whole podcasting thing back then. And remember, back then, it wasn't called podcasting, right? It was just streaming media. But anyway, so my program, my show, I got bored with it. And I went back to school. I earned my bachelor's in human development. And because I dropped out previously because of personal reasons, like many years ago. But I went back and human development, and then I started looking for jobs with that degree. Wasn't anything out there, but at least I had a bachelor's. So I said, well, you know what? I was going to use that to go into teaching. So I passed all the tests I needed, except for one final course I needed for Georgia as a certified teacher. And but I ended up getting my master's in science in the public. And I really wanted to just use that to converse as a science communicator, right? I just wanted to just start writing and making television appearances. So I had that master's, but then I realized I don't have a hard science degree. And so I said, okay, let me get a degree in biology. So that way, at least I'll have the appearance that I know what I'm talking about when we talk about these issues. And so that was really kind of my journey. And so with my first master's, I was offered the opportunity to become an education director at a science museum here in Orlando. So I left Atlanta and moved down to Orlando for that position. And I was supposed to be down here just for a year. I was going to get that experience and then come back up and work at the Georgia Aquarium. Well, a few things happened. One, I ended up losing that job due to some internal conflicts, and I started working as a science teacher for Orange County. Here. So I worked. I was at high school as a biology teacher, and then I was
living in South Florida before I actually went to Norway. For almost a decade. So definitely know about that area there.
Right. Nice. And so I ended up becoming vegan. So I was like, well, I can't go work at the Georgia Aquarium as a vegan. So so I was kind of like, okay, I need to kind of figure out what I'm going to do. And so I said, okay, I decided I'm going to go into higher education. So my journey has been from teaching high school and then slowly moving into higher education. So Valencia College, and now I'm teaching at a university. I'm teaching. Actually, I have 4 jobs right now. So I try to stay busy. I like learning new things.
You're working like a Jamaican, they say over there.
There's a joke on my page about that. Someone's talking about that. But yeah, so that's why I am.
Maybe it's our Guyanese roots, man.
I know, right?
But yeah. So that led you into the science biology thing and the critical thinking portion of it.
The critical thinking portion of it, right? Well, what ended up happening was I started noticing this trend, and I think many of your listeners who are in education or activism know that this is true. you can give people all the knowledge you have available or all the knowledge that's out there. When people have formed a particular opinion about something, it is very difficult to sway their minds. It doesn't matter how much evidence you have. It doesn't matter how much science you have. So I began thinking, what can I do to kind of crack that, to get students and society, the public, to think more critically about things or to challenge what they think is true. And so then that's when I began getting more involved in what I called initially, which is called the Socratic method. So Socratic methodology. And the Socratic method, essentially, for some of the listeners who don't know, is
you were the second person online in the atheist community that I heard talking about critical thinking so much. To be honest, the first one was Richard Carrier, who's definitely known for he's known for talking about it. And then I heard you talking about it, and that's when I saw you. I was like, oh, it's a black face, and that's when I saw you online, and that's why I had to definitely reach out to you. So this is
Richard Carrier is on my show too, like 2 or 3 times too.
Right. So, no doubt, I believe that.
Yeah,
and I believe, especially with this political climate that we have these days, this is very important. But go ahead.
Right.
I didn't mean to...
Yeah, and so for those listeners who may not, I mean, when we think critical thinking, what people envision at first is like, okay, I'm just going to be challenging the thoughts of others. But that's not what critical thinking is, not in its entirety. Critical thinking is really a metacognitive skill. So what this means is you're really going to be challenging your own thinking. That is the real critical thinking, because your opinions and your biases could be incorrect. So, and how do you evaluate that? And one way you evaluate that really is by being honest, intellectually honest, and saying, I could be wrong. And you're willing to research in depth how you could be wrong, the ways in which you could be wrong. Then you're really more apt and better able as well to then challenging others, because you now know your limitations. So when you start hearing certain arguments, even without having a formal training in logic, you just start knowing something's wrong when you hear it, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes you can hear somebody say an argument, you can't give it the name like out of some philosophy book, but you know that's not right. And so that is the value. I think it's more important that we recognize bad arguments, how to do adequate research, how to challenge ourselves intellectually, more so than the actual science content itself. I mean, don't get me wrong, science content is valuable. I'm like, I mean, if I could put science content and critical thinking on a scale, like critical thinking is 100%, and like, 99.9, if we can compare those, should be the actual content, but critical thinking should be at the top.
And by you talking, I just thought of a couple of things. Going back to the science teaching, because sometimes there's some people that are very smart in their fields, like in science, but they're bad teachers.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a huge thing that I noticed. I had one when I went to a HBCU in Langston University in Oklahoma for a short period of time. My chemistry teacher, he's from India. And he was just so awful at teaching, you know what I mean, and explaining himself, you know what I mean. So that is one part of it.
And pedagogy is a skill for sure.
Right,
and not, you're right, not many people have that ability. And I know with my research, what I'm looking at right now, I'm wondering if, because there are a lot of teachers who are smart. Right? As you mentioned,
brilliant.
And you can have some that are very knowledgeable, but they're not critical thinkers either.
Right, and that's
that is something too.
With critical thinking and debating, you know what I mean. There's some people that are super smart, but they're bad at debating and stuff.
That's like true. That. Yeah, like I don't think I'm really that good at it. I mean, I'm much better at writing all my thoughts out than really responding on the fly. When people hear me, they think, no way. Like, no, I'd rather write it out than to actually, just do on the fly. But yeah, so in my research, I'm kind of looking at critical thinking aptitudes in science educators, and I'm looking at their pedagogy. Like, are they really hitting those check boxes that the experts signal are vital for adequate pedagogy in the classroom, in the science classroom? And so right now I'm still collecting my data. But right now it looks like, teachers with the highest critical thinking scores and those who've been teaching the longest, they tend to have, they exhibit more appropriate pedagogy in the science classroom. It seems like some of the teachers who haven't been teaching so long, and then the teachers with lower critical thinking scores, tend to not really know how to invoke and encourage critical thinking in others, which I've also found interesting. But that's kind of what I suspected is going on. But again, experiences
in everything though.
Correct.
Because there are some that sit with the old ways of doing things aren't,
Yep. Indeed, I mean and it's showing it that way too. Like those with low critical thinking aptitudes who've been teaching for a long time, they still are not hitting those pedagogy tick marks. So that just goes to show there's something there. But again, I don't really know yet. This is really more kind of a quasi experimental. I was really observational study, so I don't really know yet. But I'm still looking at it.
And into the kind of entertainment. I call it entertainment, like debate world of things, like on modern day debate and other platforms, or when you watch a debate, sometimes just because a debater sounds like or looks like he's beating up opponent doesn't necessarily mean his arguments are true.
Right.
Could you get into that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because there's many instances where there's a person that can, like the Christian William Lane Craig. He's a very good debater.
Yeah, he's good.
James White, very good debater.
Yeah.
And certain other people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that these.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, a lot of these debates are very one-sided in the mind of the observer.
Right.
The people go to sporting events to cheer on the team that they want to win.
Right.
They're not really caring about the skill, all the amazing catches. And
let's say let's talk about like intelligence squared or something, or the Oxford, even those places too. They usually come to, but I think there's more of a level playing field in those forums rather than these religious forums.
Exactly.
But
more than likely, if you go to an academic facility, yes, you're going to have a lot more even-handedness, a lot more. Of course, I mean, it's a higher education facility, but you go to your typical church or some other platform that's outside of academia, or people are just there to just cheer on their favorite team. And so William Lane Craig, he knows how to ask questions in a very sophisticated way, but they're really irrelevant. But the average person may not realize those questions are irrelevant, but they're really relevant to him. And even his followers may not even understand why he's asking these questions, but he's just so charismatic. He's so confident.
Right.
And
definitely.
If the person he's talking to stutters for a moment, while he looks so poised and calm, then in their eyes, that person's lost, or their man's winning or woman's winning.
Absolutely.
And that's really sad, because that means people aren't really listening to the arguments. They don't even know how to listen to the arguments. And so I think that's what's going on. So I don't take the debates. I used to look at those so I could really cheer on my team.
Right.
But the reality is, who's really getting something out of that? So I've been invited to many debates over the years. And one of the first questions I'll ask that Christian apologist or that anti-science person, or anti-vax person, my first question is there anything that I can say to you that would change your position? If they say no, I say, and I don't have any reason to really speak with you then, because we're both going to be just talking to different parts of our community. And if you're not going to be open to allowing a fair exchange, then no one's really going to learn not much from that. Now, at the same time, however, I do try to, when I do agree to a debate, well, I like to call them discussions. When I agree to a discussion, I am able to talk more directly to the audience, because that is who I'm trying to change. A debate is just really this, you're just going at it, And a debate and a discussion are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You can debate and discuss, but most of the time, all I see are just these oppositional kind of exchanges where no one's really learning anything. And so, and as an educator, what I want to do is make sure that the audience understands what I'm saying, and how I know my arguments are right, whatever.
What biological topics do you teach?
So I pretty much teach. Since I teach at 3 different schools, but let me try to summarize this. So I teach general biology to allied health students. So I try to teach general biology in an approach as it relates to health in some way. So like COVID-19 is obviously one of those things that keeps coming up, and a large number of my students have incorrect understandings, perceptions of this virus. How it came about, how it evolves, mutates, reinfects, why vaccines aren't 100%.
Those
So these are
anti-vaxxers,
things,
man.
yeah.
Yeah. What's your take on? Yeah. You're talking about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
you
the,
just
yeah,
reminded me of that.
so those are the issues that I have to hit on quite a bit
Right,
all the
right,
time.
right,
So I'm constantly trying to give them a different understanding
right,
of their misunderstandings about COVID-19 and
right,
and the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and
right.
that's at one level. So those are my biology students. Now, for my science
Okay.
literacy course, these are students who already have college experience. They're a little more on the higher scale academically, so they're a
Right.
lot more critical. But unfortunately, even some of those have bought into the false data. So they may have a better understanding of the science overall compared to
Right.
my allied health students, interestingly, but they still are very confused about the actual data that's coming out and what a valid and verifiable and accurate source is that they can refer to get their information from. So I'm noticing that those kind of trends, and the general public really suffers the same thing. They have a low lack of science understanding and knowledge, and they don't know how to interpret scientific data. And that's really just the general public. So the schools, the
For
students I
sure.
get reflect that same societal kind of footprint there. It's the same thing.
Mm. What were and I don't know if I cut you off back then when I was asked you
Mm-hmm.
about your memorable moment, but you had so many
I know I do.
from that infidel from your time in
Yeah,
Infidel
yeah,
Guy.
no, no,
But is
yeah,
there one
I've
that
covered most
is
of them,
one
but
that is there one that stick with you or in particular that you know?
man.
No,
Yeah, and
probably.
I
Yeah,
honestly I get that question quite a bit, and I've had so
yeah.
many interesting programs that have changed my outlook and view on things.
Okay.
I even had a PhD up here. I don't think she was a PhD at the time, but anyway, someone talked about veganism on my show, and
Mm,
I was like, at first I went on teasing and laughing, and by the end of the show, I
mm,
was like,
yeah.
she brings up some really good points, but I still kept eating meat up until 5.5 years ago. But
I guess you can get a
but
little bit
yeah.
on that the veganism thing. Have you so you experience since you've switched to veganism, you've experienced, definitely, for far as your health, have you experienced a positive?
Um, well, how can I word it? One thing is, let me just to make this clear. I didn't
Yeah.
become vegan right for my health, so I want to make sure that's clear.
Okay. Okay.
If there are any ancillary health benefits, there will be that,
Okay.
I haven't really recognized many because I was never grossly out of shape or anything like that before. I
Right.
did have really horrible indigestion, like a gut
Right.
problem for a long time, and
Right.
it's only really begun to clear up, within the last few months, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, but
So
um,
I guess the
but that was
question
before
is the
veganism.
reasons behind your veganism.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. But it's important. I'm glad you brought up that because
Yeah.
it's an important topic because people bring that up quite often. It's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
how do you feel? And do you lose weight? And what's your cholesterol? And it's like,
Yeah.
that's interesting and that's cool. But
Yeah.
I'm an ethical vegan. So I'm a vegan really because I just don't believe, I just can't justify the, torture, murder and abuse of sentient, intelligent, subjectively feeling beings. I just cannot, my
Okay.
taste buds are just not that important for me to justify
Okay.
something like that. So
Okay.
that's my ethical stance as far as that's concerned. Yeah.
Okay. I like the way you said it too at the end because the long
The subjectively feeling is the most important part
right because I was about because I was about to say
yep. People, what about plants? They're
implants.
alive. Exactly.
Wait, we
Yep.
can't hear them screaming when you're boiling them or whatever.
Exactly. And people say
Yeah,
that too, like, oh, well,
yeah.
plants,
They have
plants
debates on this.
scream,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like
Plant.
plants respond to stimuli. Like
Right.
when people say
Because
that plants scream, what they're saying is they have seen some documentary on TV or some really horrible
right.
anti-vegan argument where they
Uh-huh.
say that plants respond to stimuli,
The Venus flytrap.
or yes, or a leaf on one tree can know that it's getting eaten by a particular caterpillar, and then the entire tree begins to
Trees.
respond by
Life of
producing
the
toxins.
trees.
Right. And so, but when people say that, I go, okay, so let's
Yeah.
think about this. So you're saying because there was a physiological response, that means it's sentient, or shall I say, so it subjectively feels, I should say, or that it's in pain. I said, how about this though? When sunlight hits your skin, the melanocytes, right, begin to produce melanin and you get darker. That's automatic. Do you feel that process? Not at all. So it's like,
I even heard
that's what
an
it's saying.
argument by the famous Indian Muslim apologist. I forgot his Dr. Zakir Naik or whatever.
I'm not
Dr.
familiar.
Zakir Naik. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
I think I have heard of him. Yeah.
probably he's huge in India or whatever. He even said something about people that are against eating meat. He had made some example about if you had like two kids, um, like one that was deaf, deaf
Hmm.
and blind or whatever, and mute, and like he couldn't feel pain. Well, he could feel pain, but you couldn't, you couldn't
Oh, you wouldn't be able to detect that
yeah, detect if
or
he
identify that.
yeah, or something like that. He tried to give an example of that as that being a plant
Mm-mm.
rather than somebody being healthy where they can scream out and you can
Oh my
clearly see that they're
gosh.
in pain when it comes to animals. So they're saying just because, like you said, see they'll
Jeez.
debate you on that, just because we can't see them screaming or whatnot,
No, we
and
look
they're in
we can
pain, or
no,
since
we
we
have
can't, since they're in pain, doesn't mean that they're not in pain. Doesn't mean that
no,
they
we look
don't die
at
because they're living things.
well, they do die, of
So,
course, but so
so
does algae.
how far does the rabbit hole go, man, when it comes to this, man?
Well, as I mentioned, they have to be a subjectively feeling being. Like, can they reflect on their own demise? Can they, because responding to stimuli alone is not a pain response. As I mentioned before, I don't feel pain when my skin turns dark when I'm on the sun.
Right.
And there's no central nervous system between each cell, even though they can't respond to each other based on certain events. Like right now, if I were to get a hook and pick out, a micro hook and pick out a few cells, because of density dependency, they will fill in that gap with a new cell. That's
Mm,
automatic, right? I wouldn't even know that's happening. So with plants, that's the same kind of thing. And there's no brain needing to reflect on that and say, oh my gosh, we just lost Johnny. Let's make a new cell. It doesn't
right.
happen that way. So with plants, there's no reason to think they're not the same. They're the same way.
Right.
And the same thing with algae and I mean other microorganisms as well.
Right.
You know,
Well, then
and
they,
so yeah.
I heard, trust me, I heard these arguments, and then I heard that, and then also they're talking about how humans are, we have canines, and we're not herbivorous animals. We can
Frugivores, yeah.
digest meat, and then we don't have just those herbivorous kind of teeth or whatever. So we have kind of both. We can tear meat up, and they always say, well, what's the reason behind it?
Well,
Just like
interestingly
circumcision in
enough,
a way. It's like,
well, again, and we can talk about anatomical similarities and things like
right,
that, but again,
right,
that kind of again that deviates, however,
right.
from the fact that we are higher beings now, and we don't have to contribute unnecessarily to
Mm,
torture,
mm,
misery,
mm-hmm,
pain,
mm-hmm,
death. We don't have to do that.
right.
So it doesn't matter where we came from. That would be a historical fallacy.
Mm,
If it's absolutely necessary that we have to eat animals, then we would do so. Like I
right.
love that argument. They love the well, should I say I hate it, but I love it when they
Mm.
say, "Oh, well, if you're stranded on the island and all you got like is a puppy, what you going to do?" And I'm like, "That puppy's dinner." Like, what are you talking about? That's not a contradiction. I'm not going to
Right.
die. I mean, you know what I mean? Now, if I know that just eating the puppy alone and I'm still going to die regardless, then probably not.
Mm,
Now some vegans would say, no, I would not eat that puppy. I would just die with the puppy.
mm.
But that doesn't
That's
mean
what they
that,
say.
yeah, but they want to put you in extreme circumstances as if
Right,
that's
right,
logical. It's like, no, you go to the store where meat is packaged nice and conveniently for you, and
right.
you can just go home and fry that up or whatever. And that's just a completely different argument. So I say, yeah, and I tell them, I'll tell you when it happens.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah, when that happens, I'll let you know.
Right,
But right
right.
now, yeah, but so there's no reason for it, really. I can't think of, and people like to argue ad hoc reasons for, or they'll try to argue biological necessity. I even have a friend of mine, he has like 10 PhDs or something. And the dude is amazingly
Mm,
educated.
right.
But even he said, oh, your brain is going to shrink. I said, bro, all of our brains are going to shrink as they get older. Like, what are you talking about? Well, you can start suffering from like electrical signaling. I said, what evidence is that? I know vegans who have been vegan for 40, 50, 60 years, and they're not having any issues. Why am I going to all of a sudden have issues?
Hmm.
So yeah, sometimes people just try to argue, medical
You're
reasons.
lacking something.
Yeah, because the ethical argument I think
Yeah.
is pretty strong. I mean, again, there's some philosophers who can debate the opposite pretty well, I think, but
Mm,
I think for the average person, when they listen to the ethical argument, it is so strong they have to deviate from that, and so then they
right.
start looking at health reasons because it's
Right.
really hard to argue that. Like, how would you? I don't know how people can. All you can say is, "Look, I like it because it tastes good." That's really about it for most people who are non-vegans. Because when the
Hmm.
vegan says, "I cannot consciously contribute to pain, suffering, torture, and misery of sentient, subjectively feeling beings," then what's wrong with that? Like, how can somebody look at it? How can someone argue with a vegan who
Right,
says that?
right.
It's so weird,
Right.
but that happens a lot. They get,
Yeah.
oh, you tree hugging, whatever. It's like, I'm just
Right.
telling you how I feel. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So your current theological philosophy, are you an
Yeah.
agnostic atheist? Are you a mysticist?
It,
Are you believe in the historical Jesus as
heck
well?
no.
What's your
I tell you, on the question of Jesus, I
African
find it.
spirituality even? Or whatever? I don't know.
It's funny. All
What's
those
your
things you
current
say have a place in my theology, right? Or in my
right.
philosophy. When it comes to African theology, I always argue this when people say, my God is the one true God. I love to ask, what's wrong with your ancestors' gods? That's the first question I always ask. Because they love this all the time. It's like, wait a minute. So you're saying, so your God from your villages wasn't good enough. So you had to be educated about basically a Eurocentralized, essentially, or Yeshua, or some other deity.
Right.
And how do you know that one's correct versus these others? And so that's I just think that's kind of strange. I mean, I don't believe in any gods,
Right.
but even
but
if
if
I
you
did,
was going to, you might as well,
yeah,
if your answer correct.
there'll be, I might as well go ahead and worship, the gods of Africa, because
Right.
it's just the same, really, as far as its
No
evidence.
doubt.
But it depends on the question. So if someone says, do you believe that there could be a conscious force that can create things somewhere in the universe? I'm agnostic about that. If you ask me, do you think that there is a one true God who created two human beings in a garden and a snake came along who was Satan? I'm an atheist. Okay, I don't believe in that theology whatsoever. I have no belief in that. So I'm an atheist, and I mean it literally, like without theistic belief. So
okay,
I'm not,
with that being said, the Jesus question or whatever, do you believe he was a historical figure?
I
Or
honestly,
do you believe he
I'll
never existed?
okay, now keep in mind, I'm not an expert,
Yeah.
on
No,
any of that.
no, I got you.
So I'm going to give
True.
you my uninformed opinion about it, and I'm
Okay.
honest about that.
Got you.
Based on my reading and interviewing Bob Price, Acharya S, and Dennis, and a number of other people I've
But
interviewed.
you ain't never interviewed Bart Ehrman.
Yes, I've interviewed Bart Ehrman as well.
You did?
Yep.
Okay. And some of the other.
And so my thinking on this really is that ultimately, for me personally, obviously it's irrelevant. I don't care either way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
However,
I was just
if
curious.
I look at how it affects others and how they perceive it, I would honestly think, based on the stories where Jesus allegedly was, when you look at the actual layout of the land and how fast he was in certain areas, I honestly think there may be multiple messiahs. I think that there were multiple messiahs that different Jewish and other religious sects in that period, and because people keep forgetting that Yeshua is just the Messiah. So that could have been anyone. His name could have been James, and they would have given him because it's a title. They would have given him the title of Yeshua, and if they thought that he was that person that was going to be here to come save mankind, to complete, the Old Testament, right? So you have these group of people, even and many were nomads looking for the Savior. And so when you actually look at the Bible, when you read the Bible, you see that he pops up in like different places, which is kind of odd. It's like, how did he get from there to there?
Because he's God, damn it.
I know, right? Yeah, that's true. And so my thinking on that, he probably did. I think he probably might have existed as a real person, but there actually may not just be one from where we get our motif and our stories from, which might explain why in some cases you see Jesus with different personalities as well, because these are the authors recollecting or making it up their experiences with Jesus, or what they thought of Jesus, I should say.
Right.
Yeah, based on what I heard. Yeah.
We got about 10 more minutes. What are some of the people that inspired you?
Wow, who are some of the people that inspire me? Man, that's an interesting question.
Right. There's probably so many, but some kind of I guess you can kind of start like back then,
scaffolding a bit. Yeah, it's funny. I'm a genealogist, and so I'm also a genetic genealogist. And so when I started researching my family tree, I discovered that my great grandmother had a school built after her in Charleston, South Carolina.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called the Murray Lassane Elementary School. And so I started doing some research and discovered she was the first Black superintendent of what do you call it? Negro schools. back then, and she fought for school lunch, transportation, bus transportation for kids, and all that stuff. And so she's my hero. And
The ancestors, man. Wow.
I actually have a picture where we look side by side, and I even look like her. It's so weird.
Wow.
But yeah, so she is definitely my hero, man. And and my grandfather was a medical doctor. He was a medical doctor, and my grandmother was a nurse, all on that same side of the family. So I come from a long line of medical practitioners and educators. And look, and here I am now teaching biological sciences to medical students. And I'm even thinking about just getting some form of medical certification as well, just so I can be more useful if I need to on the ground, when things go bad, when hospitals need help. So I'm looking into trying to get some medical certifications myself. So but yeah, but definitely my great grandmother, she was that catalyst. And when earlier I mentioned other catalysts that appeared on my show, but Neil deGrasse Tyson, I really respect his approach to science.
I see you have Star Talk in the back. I like your wall in the back.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love, my students love this too, because they all see something they can identify with.
Could you show us a little bit behind?
Sure.
I saw the statue of the statue.
Oh yeah. This is Charles Darwin.
Darwin. There we go.
Yep, exactly right.
And I see the picture of Darwin on the bottom left, right there.
Exactly right. Yeah, this is actually somebody, National Geographic produced this thing. I have another copy of it somewhere. But but this is actually this is like the story of Darwin. And
okay.
Yeah, so
I heard, black folks, we always have some story. I heard one of his assistants. It was always an assistant that was a black person, right? I heard Charles Darwin. I heard Charles Darwin. I swear I heard somewhere that he had like an assistant. So was that have you heard that?
I've heard many different stories over the years. I can't remember which ones I've heard.
Right. I know Thomas Edison, he had one.
Of course. But remember, but Charles Darwin, right? They were in the UK. So things were quite different.
Right.
Many European households, at least the posh folks, actually did not have slaves. So it was, remember, the U.S. were the U.S. They were the biggest ones on the whole slavery tip. But anyway, but yeah, then this is book Atheism, the Case Against God. I highly recommend it for those. This was I actually sold my other book I had, but I just recently repurchased this copy. This book changed my life. That was a
catalyst.
This book was a major catalyst in getting me to start questioning more. So when I mentioned that, I wrote a list called 100 Questions About God that I wrote while I was working for the federal prison.
When was that published? That one right there? Because I haven't.
This is probably 87. I mean,
that was way back then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it might be 87, 84, something like that.
Right.
But this is an updated one with Lawrence Krauss, who actually does a preface for it.
Okay.
So the physicist Lawrence Krauss. So yeah, and Prometheus books produced this too. So yeah, this is one of my favorite books. Oh, 1979 actually, 1979. But it's worth it, trust me, because their arguments don't change much. So,
right, for sure.
Yeah, I'm reading.
Because I saw that Star Talk because we were talking about the
So
Carl Sagan.
Demon Haunted World. I highly recommend getting that book. Stephen Hawking, of course. I have some games and stuff, books on viruses. I subscribe to the Humanist Science magazines. I got like another board game on evolution. I actually use this microscope and hook it up to show my students things under the microscope, but I'm doing like live tutoring sessions to explain cellular morphology and things like that.
Right. Are you a gamer as well?
No, but I am on VR chat. I am. So there's only one game I play consistently, and it's like World of Warcraft, but the very first one.
Okay.
People like, you still play that old game? Like, yep, that's the only game I play.
Right.
But I am on VR chat. If you're looking for me, just look under I think it's Reggie. I think I might have given you the VR chat handle.
Right, and I'll put that underneath the video and stuff.
Yeah, you'll find me on VR chat on the weekends. Sometimes I'll pop up on the weekends and I'll be in there. And yeah. That's about it, really.
No, I think that was, I think we perfected had the right amount of questions for the right amount of time, about 6 minutes. So you can if there's anything else that comes to mind, you can.
I hope I didn't talk too much. I know I can talk pretty fast. I got a lot in my head.
No. I hope I ain't cut you off too much. That's my people.
No, you're perfectly fine, man. I appreciate it, man.
But if there's anything else that you can add, for sure.
And I love it, man. Feel free.
We might have missed.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot, but you can feel free to invite me back, and I can maybe just hit on one particular topic. I just kind of wanted to give listeners, especially people who've heard me in the past, kind of just really understand my journey and where I've come from and why I'm moving in the direction I am now. And again,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that
critical
was
thinking again is the focus.
I was thinking something we talked about
Right,
before that we have a connection on that one too, on the
right.
passing of our mothers.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. My mom died.
right.
Uh, man.
It's tough, ain't it? Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It took me many nights I would still wake up because some event would happen positively in my life, and
for sure.
even for a number of years, I'll still wake up wishing I could tell her about this event.
Man, I
And
almost teared up my last interview. Well, the second to last interview with Nah
mm,
Dove. I don't know if you recall when I posted Nah
mm,
Dove, and then I had that special guest Molefi Asante on there, which I didn't know
mm.
he was going to be in the chat. And anyway, so that brought I almost, man, at the end of the interview, just thinking about it doesn't go away, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. And again, we didn't get a chance to really dig deep
Right,
into many things. So
right,
some of the listeners, if you heard me make a comment, I may not have had a chance to clarify it, or
right.
may
Well,
have been talking
we just
about a
introducing
particular
you.
instance.
Yeah, we'll
So yeah,
introduce you. We'll
yeah.
have you. Yeah, you on my Facebook and stuff like that. So definitely for sure. Maybe
All right.
maybe in a week or two, and then we can hit up another subject or whatnot
Oh yeah.
or whatever.
I mean, definitely media literacy is important.
Right.
Critical thinking, how to analyze scientific, papers, how to know when you're being taken for a ride. How do you know, that
Okay.
that you're coming across pseudoscience and things like that. I think the public needs to know how to identify these things and become better
For
public
sure.
scientists. So
For sure. For sure.
yeah. So
All right,
all
my
that good
man.
stuff
Yeah,
is
we'll
good.
set up another time, whether it's a week or 2 weeks from now or what have you,
All right, sounds good.
on whatever subject that we're gonna go into and delve into more, then let you have the floor. But we were just trying to, going through different points and trying to and kind of introducing you to the people that don't know you.
All
Because
right.
I know that a lot of the atheist community, online atheist community definitely
Right.
know
Yeah, many
about
of
you.
them do. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I'm
But
getting old now, but
trying to introduce you to a new audience or whatnot. Yeah.
sounds good.
But I appreciate you blessing my channel.
You're
I'm not a
welcome.
Christian, but I'm saying that word anyway. Blessing my channel, man,
You're
and
very welcome
stopping through my
anytime.
little old platform and
All right. Sounds
stuff.
good.